Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy Show with me, your host, Tara Roberts. This is the official Mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, May 13th, and I am live on YouTube taking your questions, so drop them into comments. I've got mailbag questions for you. We also have a lot of schedule release stuff. I don't know about you guys, but when they release all the I appreciate the international games because I have a lot of international friends. And I'm happy that they get their, games elsewhere and whatnot. But I want the full schedule, right? The leaking of here's the Thanksgiving evening game and this, and that. Cool, but give me the full schedule. Give me all the good stuff. But we did get the strength of schedule, so that is what we are going to talk about here. We're going to talk about the strength of schedule before we get to talk about the full schedule release. And also, we've got breaking news. I love it when news breaks literally right before the show starts. Devon Achane, congratulations. You are now the proud owner of a very hefty contract here. Let me pull up the numbers here. Let's see. Boom, there we go. Devon Achane getting paid $68 million, 4-year extension. 32 million guaranteed, 17 million per year. Shout out to the running backs getting paid. First, Breece Hall. Did Breece got his extension, I believe, after the last time we talked. So we did not talk about the Breece Hall extension, but I mean, we knew that Breece was going to be playing with the Jets. And we know that, Achane was going nowhere. They made it very clear they were not trading Achane. So this is not surprising, but it is kind of critical, right? Because we've got these high-end running backs on bad teams, and a lot of times that makes drafters a little bit wary, right? I feel like Achane is one of the ones that I get one of the bigger question marks around. I have people saying, I don't feel comfortable drafting Achane. What is he really going to provide? Miami's going to be so bad, right? But we got to remember, like, the type of player, right? Like, if we're saying Derrick Henry on the Dolphins, that's a different story, right? Although arguably with a mobile quarterback, you can still get yours, right? Because lanes will be open. But you would be talking about a running back who doesn't do so well when playing from behind, right? Because, there's got to be volume, right? There's not going to be a lot of pass catching. We got the exact opposite situation of Achane. I'm not fading Achane in any way, shape, or form. I think I'm a little higher than what is consensus on him? Let me see. I don't have that up. I have him as my RB5. In consensus rankings, he is RB6. So not that big of a difference. I think he's moved up. I feel like it was more dramatic than that he was in the 7 or 8 range, maybe a couple of weeks ago, or for the majority of the offseason, and maybe people are getting a little bit more comfortable. But to me, he's a clear top 5 back. Like when we're looking at the Dolphins, I understand the fear, right, of the Dolphins and just how bad, the offense can be. Unfortunately, because the only real weapon that they have at this point is Devon Achane. But you got to remember, we're not rostering Achane for goal line touches. That's why it was kind of funny last year to me when who was it? Tyreek Hill came out and was making weird comments about Achane at the goal line. And well, we've got, Jalen Wright. Okay, well, which is funny because Jalen Wright's not a big back. That's cool. We were never drafting Achane for a bunch of goal line touches, right? It's volume, big plays, right? And not even a whole bunch of touches, right? We're not looking for you to get 18 carries. We're looking for you to get 12 and a lot of breakaway big runs, right? And more importantly, the receptions and the yards from the receptions, right? It's not a touchdown factory here. We're looking for the checkdowns. We're looking for the usage through the air. And given the lack of receiving options that they have, that actually emboldens me to feel more optimistic about Achane. I've made a few jokes here and there about him being the receptions leader of the team in 2026. I think it's more of a reality than we might be thinking about here. I think it's highly possible that the real true receptions leader this season is going to be Devon Achane. We know that's a big bread and butter spot for him. Looking at his stats from last year, we had a whopping 67 receptions, and that was down from 2024, honestly. And remember, 2024 was marred by weird Tuaism, right? But 67 receptions last year. The fact that he had 238 attempts and over 1,300 yards, it's chunk plays, right? And again, the presence of Malik Willis and the fact that defenses are going to have to account for him, because on the small sample size that we have and what we know about him from college, his athleticism is incredible. You're going to have to account and spy on him consistently. That makes things a little bit easier for a running back there. So again, shout out to Devon Achane. Feeling good about him. He will remain a top 5 back for me. And I can't push him arguably any higher. I mean, how can you, right? It's Bijan, Jameer, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, and Achane. I mean, the only argument that you could make is for Jonathan Taylor, but I actually do feel a little bit better about Jonathan Taylor. And maybe we go ahead and pull up the let's go ahead and pull up the strength of schedule, because Indianapolis is actually one of the ones that I wanted to talk about here. I had to figure out how to add in another file because I realized I did not preload my strength of schedule, unfortunately, here. So there we go. Boom. Strength of schedule. Let me pull it up on the screen for you guys. Boom. There we go. And remove my banner so that you can see the full thing. Strength of schedule. Beautiful. Very interesting here. Because again, actually, before we move on from Achane, look at Miami, guys. Miami with the second most difficult schedule, which again can still bode well for Devon Achane playing from behind. If that happens and we're just getting the Dolphins playing from behind, more checkdowns, more checkdowns, more checkdowns there. So receptions up in the Christian McCaffrey range. Let's go on that one. But Indianapolis, again, as I was talking about my rankings, so my top 5 running backs are very clear for, and I've actually, my top 10 running backs are just like extremely solid. There's very little really that could change that for me in the offseason. But again, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey at 3. That's a default, Christian McCaffrey. If he stays on the field, you're guaranteed the production of a top 3 running back, right? But I will say, he will give me pause. It'll be one of those ones where I have him ranked as a top 3 running back, but I am a bit cautious. I will be a bit cautious with the amount of shares of Christian McCaffrey that I have, because the amount of workload that he had last year was just absolutely stupid, right? I mean, for the first time in his career, he surpassed 300 attempts. And I don't blame the 49ers for that. They had to, unfortunately, because their offense was in such a destitute place, where he was really the only consistent weapon for the entire season. He played a full 17 games. Nobody else did, right? Not even the quarterback. He was the only constant out there. Over 300 attempts. Efficiency was not great, but I don't judge him for that because, again, we're talking about a system where he was the only weapon. The offensive line was just kind of right? So 3.9 yards per carry. I'm not panicking over that just because, again, it makes sense, right? But we would be remiss to not notice that his yards per carry, his efficiency has clearly gone down over the past couple of years, right? And you can say that might be age regression, but it's tough to, it's tough to even care about that when you have a man that gets over 100 receptions, right? And looking at the 49ers receiving core, again, we've got Mike Evans, Ricky Pearsall, who I love both those guys, right? But again, I think we talked about Mike Evans and his draft position a little bit here, or maybe we didn't. I actually did that on our ranking shows with Fantasy Bros. With Mike Evans, he's a weird one for me in terms of rankings because I know what he'll do when he's on the field, but at this point, I can't trust him to be on the field because of age and because of the back-to-back seasons that have been marred by the hamstring injuries. So that's a major issue there, unfortunately. So we've got him, who is a massive risk to not make it through the season. We've got Ricky Pearsall, who has not proven he can make it through a season, unfortunately. I don't blame him for that rookie season, obviously. Although we should note that while there was the can I say the pew pew wound? I don't know if I can say that on YouTube. Although there was that also, he had dealt with a hamstring injury before that as well. So again, recurring injuries year after year with him in his little short career there. And then obviously when we're talking about Dejon Stribling being drafted, it seems like he clearly was designed to be a Jawan Jennings replacement, but that is cool. And that might offer some high upside games every now and then. But I think we've grown very comfortable to acknowledge the fact that the massive upside performance that we saw from Jawan Jennings, random outliers, not something that you can rely on for him to be a strong wide receiver one. So while I think Stribling was probably, a pick that they really loved in terms of what they were looking to replenish in their offense, um, I struggle to see the massive upside there, right? I don't see him as being a Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel level of production that they've had in the past from those guys, right? So we're looking at the receiving core, it's still volatile. This offense is still going to run through Christian McCaffrey. And if Mike Evans can stay healthy, that would only benefit Christian McCaffrey anyway. But coming off of a season where you touched the ball over 400 times, that's absolutely, absolutely insane. You touch the ball over 400 times at Christian McCaffrey's age. Logic would say that would not bode well for him in terms of making it through the season healthy this year. So I do exercise a little bit of caution, right? So while he is a top 3 back for me, theoretically, I probably would pass over him more often and prefer to draft a Devon Achane. But the guy that is sitting there in that top 5 that I think sometimes people are, feel a little strange about is oddly enough Jonathan Taylor. And I get that because as somebody who rostered a good bit of Jonathan Taylor last year, the good times were good. And then the back half of the season was absolutely miserable. It wasn't destitute. It was just underwhelming for what we had come to expect after that massive start where he was just giving us overall RB1 performances over and over and over and over again. But we know exactly what happened with Jonathan Taylor, right? And this is why I bring up the strength of schedule here. Indianapolis is all the way down there at the bottom. They've got a lovely 4th from the bottom of easiest strength of schedules. And I do want to see how this plays out, right? But that's very encouraging because when we look at what happened last year in terms of the Jonathan Taylor downturn in production, it was a schedule issue. The Colts schedule was obviously a lot softer in the beginning of the season. Not super soft, right? There were still some games where, like a Denver, he scored 29 points in half PPR, overall RB1 of the week against Denver, right? But then you had matchups against teams like Miami, Tennessee, Arizona, Las Vegas, right? So 2 matchups against Tennessee. So there were a lot of easier front-loaded stuff, and he obviously massively exploited those matchups. Then you get to the back half of the season. Mind you, we do have to also account for the fact that Daniel Jones, when we look at the Daniel Jones injury, we can't just look at it from the perspective of like, cut it off at the day he got injured. And from that moment on, the offense was bad. No, remember he was playing on a fractured leg, which was absolutely insane. But he played some games on a fractured leg prior to that injury. And you can see immediately when that happened. And I don't think we knew right off the bat, right? But once they went back and said it happened at this point, you could see, oh God, yeah, he stopped running at that point. The rushing numbers went away, right? So you can, and then you look at the back half of the schedule, there were teams, Kansas City, Houston, Jacksonville, Seattle. I mean, it was just a nasty backloaded schedule. So to see this easy, nice strength of schedule for the Colts here of literally it's just Cleveland, New Orleans, Cincinnati, and then the Colts makes me feel super good about Jonathan Taylor. So if any of you had any concerns, given the fact that we got bamboozled last season by end of season Jonathan Taylor, not being the beginning of season Jonathan Taylor, God, we were riding high. And that was a just disturbing letdown there. But strength of schedule there makes me feel really good. Going to jump to the comments here because I see you guys in the chat. I do want to jump to Jeff Rogers first because he got in here before the show even started. Jeff Rogers says, a couple of quick questions before you start. Is Justin Jefferson a top 5 pick again with Kyler Murray? And what round do you draft? Would you draft Kyler Murray? Thank you. So the easy one is Justin Jefferson for that one for me. Justin Jefferson right now is my number 7 ranked player. And arguably, if we get to preseason, and I know for a fact that Kyler Murray is going to be the starter, And I do have my hangups with Kyler Murray. I'm not a Kyler Murray defender. I tried for years. I let that go a long time ago. But but I do know that Kyler Murray is better than JJ McCarthy, right? So if we get there and we say we know that Kyler Murray is going to start the season, right? Then I could feel comfortable with moving Justin Jefferson up a single spot, right? Because my top 4 is very solidified and won't change. It's Puka Nacua, Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Volume, volume, volume. And then with Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's just pure safety. I've grown more comfortable with Amon-Ra because I hate that he doesn't have that same Puka Nacua ceiling. But I know for a fact that he is going to be a top 5 at the end of the day, right? When all the numbers are added up, he will be a top 5 receiver year after year. The consistency that he has shown has been incredible. So to me, that earns a top 5 spot, because even though you don't necessarily have the same ceiling as a guy like Justin Jefferson in all things equal, right? You do have the more stable situation, the better quarterback, and just the more consistent volume there. So Amon-Ra gets that solidified number 4 spot for me. But after that is where it gets a little interesting. For right now, I have CD there. I think that will change. Unfortunately, I want CeeDee Lamb higher in rankings, and I'm giving him that preferential wide receiver 5 spot right now. But honestly, provided George Pickens is playing the season with the Cowboys, and it does look like that is going to be the case, I would not expect him to be traded unless we get an insane sweetheart deal, which I don't think will happen. Insane sweetheart deal to the Cowboys. George should be there, which makes things murky in terms of pure volume for CeeDee Lamb there, and touchdowns as well, right? I think we would probably see a lot of the same of what we saw last season. Maybe it might get a little bit better, but the difference between CeeDee Lamb in prior seasons and CeeDee Lamb with George Pickens on the field was not pretty in terms of fantasy production. So I could move CD back for sure, 100%, once a lot of these other players start to get into place, right? Naturally, Rashee Rice would be my number 5 player. I'm very big on Rashee Rice. If he makes it to preseason in a good legal standing, he will be my number 5 receiver. And then Jefferson would be right there at number 6. So very close, right? But there's a lot of positives working in favor of Justin Jefferson. One, health, right? When you look at a lot of, the players around him, right? There are some murky situations, right, in terms of quarterbacks as well and health. Like a Malik Neighbors, who unfortunately we got news that he had to, get a second surgery to kind of clean up there, which doesn't necessarily mean that we need to panic or anything, but it is important for us to note, right? Because like looking back to last season, we had Chris Godwin, who had that second surgery that we didn't know about until the last minute. And that obviously affected his timeline as well. So would have to dig in more in terms of what the second surgery was like and what the recovery, and if it was just more of a procedural thing, right? But again, even when they say, it's just procedural, just clean up, sometimes that can extend the timeline a little bit. So that makes things a little bit murkier for Malik Neighbors. Obviously, Nico Collins needing CJ Stroud to stay upright and, behave from a accuracy perspective. Drake London dealing with his quarterback situation, and the fact that we probably will not know between Michael Penix and Tua. Michael Penix has his injury issue as well. Tua has just his issues in general, so it's not a great situation. So Jefferson, as long as we get Kyler Murray and there's the starter, I think top 6 is a very nice little spot for him for sure. And if you don't trust Rashee Rice and want to put him at 5, I wouldn't argue with it, right? So yeah, kind of borderline there. Now Kyler is interesting. For right now, I have him ranked as QB 19 because again, you kind of got to earn that spot. And also the trust level that I've had with Kyler is just so low at this point. The fact that we have not seen him have we saw a top 12 season from him in 2024. He was QB 6 on the season, but I mean, a top 10 season from him has been a solid 5 years, right? So in terms of my desire to draft Kyler, not as high as my desire to draft Justin Jefferson, just because it's easier for the wool to be pulled over us with Kyler Murray because of, again, like volume can be underwhelming for him. If he doesn't use his legs enough, like very limited usage of the legs last season was peculiar, which was strange because he wasn't. I mean, very peculiar, right? I would have thought that we would have had a little bit more of that. But again, it was a small sample size, really. So honestly, if you extrapolate it out, it's probably not even that bad still, but not ideal, right? So we want to see more uptick in terms of volume on the ground for him. And again, just general trust level. I could see myself moving him up to maybe QB 15 would be the highest I could grab him. I definitely would not be relying on him unless you felt comfortable with streaming, right? Like if I were drafting a Kyler Murray, I would have to draft another quarterback to kind of maybe platoon. Maybe that's where you take your chance and you're saying, okay, I'm going to do a Kyler Murray and a Tyler Shuck kind of situation and just platoon and play out the best season because at least I know Tyler Shuck has the job there. So he's still QB2 territory, mid QB2 at best, because again, trust level to make it through an entire season also hinges on his, tendency to have the injuries as well. More comments here. Hope you are doing well, Easy E. Shout out to you in the chat. From 2026 waiver wire picks, will Tua be the starter in week 1? And will he stay healthy all season? I thought he was going to retire. I've grown more comfortable with Tua's health just because there's no real way to predict it, unfortunately. And he's proven he can make it through an entire season. So it's probably injury doesn't, like if I were doing apples to apples, I trust Kyler to make it through a season less just because Kyler's injuries come in a wide variety of ways. We know that there's one specific way that, injury happens with Tua, right? But the Michael Penix recovery timeline does make me a little worrisome, right? If he's not able to properly compete with Tua, we've got the new coaching staff, Kevin Stefanski in there. And, just in terms of what we know about Kevin Stefanski, I feel like between Michael Penix and Tua Tagovailoa, I think he would like Tua as more of his type, more of his style of quarterback, right? Obviously, shortness doesn't bother him in terms of quarterbacks there. And I think maybe in terms of what he would want and targeting, Kyle Pitts and whatnot, and leaning aggressively on the run with Bijan, I would not be shocked if Tua is the starter, but that one probably boils down more to Michael Penix recovery timeline there. If they want to say, oh, we're going to take a safe route, and since we have Tua, we're going to start him, sure. But I think if Penix is ready, he would be the preferred starter. He'd definitely be my preferred starter between the two, for sure. But in terms of Tua keeping a job, no. And that's why I don't really like either of these quarterbacks. Between him and Penix, I won't be drafting either, even in Superflex, right? And it's also why Drake London's position in terms of my rankings falls back a little bit more. It's literally the quarterback situation. I don't think that either one of them will play a full season, and I don't think it's an injury thing. I think that, leash will be short. And obviously we've seen leash is short with Kevin Stefanski, very short with Kevin Stefanski in the past, right? So Tua gets out there 4 weeks, looks terrible. Could see Penix go out there 4-game, have a shaky game, pull Tua, put him back in, see, like I could get into a weird, like little nasty platooning situation. So I don't trust it, to be quite frank, in terms of either one of them at all. Shout out to Linda Wells in the chat. Only Morale says the Bears have the toughest schedule. Yeah, I wanted to talk about Caleb Williams there. Really the entire Bears offense, but Caleb Williams is an intriguing one because he is my QB9 right now. But honestly, I felt like that was pushing it a little. And the reason that he is QB9 is because, one, we've got Patrick Mahomes. Like, if I had a healthy, guaranteed version of Patrick Mahomes week 1, I would take Patrick Mahomes over Caleb Williams all day, every day. Not just, obviously Chiefs' strength of schedule is not fantastic, but strength of schedule added on to the fact that, again, when we've talked about Caleb Williams in the past, the Bears offense, I don't think people give enough credit for the level of balance that Ben Johnson brings to the offense. Because when we look at it from a fantasy perspective, we remember that neither DeAndre Swift nor Kyle Monangai had massive upside, right? But the combination of them was excellent. They leaned heavily on the run. They were a very run-heavy team. Despite the fact that Caleb Williams is obviously a fantastic quarterback, they want to be balanced. He doesn't want them chucking the ball. And their run attack was very effective last year, the way they did it. They retained, obviously, and not, there was no contract issue or anything. So they kept their roster as is with the running backs, right? So when we're looking at it from that perspective, I feel like it's going to be kind of a repeat situation for the Bears. And the only thing that's really changed is DJ Moore exiting the team. And when we look at Caleb Williams, because they are such a well-balanced team and they can lean on the run, you get a lot of those games where he doesn't have to do a ton in terms of aggressive volume. So aggressive volume lacking, tough schedule, maybe some dogfights, right, in terms of very hard fought out, maybe lower scoring games. I know they've been working on improving their defense as well. And the one thing that I did want to point out, especially with the Bears schedule, you see the Packers right there as well. You see the Patriots right there. There is a NFC North and AFC East combination of matchups there in terms of schedules that is really causing an issue here, I think, for those guys, because there are obviously some highly competitive teams in those divisions at the top bumping up against each other. And I think that's a lot of what's going on there. So we'll see how it aligns in terms of the back half of the season, because obviously that's very critical for us. But Bears' schedule being so tough is a concern in terms of the matchups there for sure, especially, as we kind of grow more comfortable with the fact that it's hard from a fantasy perspective, because I struggle with it. I hate coming to terms with the fact that we do need to consider the location of some of these teams in terms of how it stacks up for our playoff schedules and whatnot, in terms of Green Bay and Chicago, the nasty wind and weather that can occur with Chicago in our fantasy playoff schedule. So that is always something to consider as well, which is why I do want to point out Detroit there at the bottom. They have lucked out in terms of strength of schedule, whereas everybody else is way up there at the top in the NFC North. And again, it's that NFC North, AFC East matchup, divisional matchup that is really driving this issue here. The Lions are there at the bottom with one of the easiest schedules, but tomorrow will be critical because once we get the schedule release there, I want to see how those end of season games line up for Detroit, because easy strength of schedule is cool. But if we're talking about Detroit in the back half of the season during our fantasy playoffs, and they've got games at New England, at Green Bay, at Chicago, that's a no-go there. So it could be an overall easy schedule that might be backloaded in a weird, nasty way. So I'm very interested to see how that works out there for them, for sure. AG Lowe, as we were talking about CMC, mentioned Jordan James. It's really interesting trying to figure out what we're going to do with Christian, because, I get a lot of questions about, handcuffing Christian McCaffrey. And the problem with that in terms of handcuffing Christian McCaffrey is that there is no way to trust ultimately who the 49ers will put on the field. It could be Jordan James. It could be Isaac Guerrero. It could be Kaylon Black, their new overdrafted rookie running back there. And then it also is dependent on them, actually being healthy. We had that momentary Isaac Guerrero that disappeared real quick. So yeah, figuring out that's a really critical for one to us to pay attention to in the offseason there. Obviously, we know Christian McCaffrey, right? But trying to figure out who is actually going to be the direct handcuff there is going to be critical, because it could come into play very early in the season. And it will be one of those situations, right, where if we're not rostering the correct handcuff and then he gets injured in a game and Kaylon Black has 12 carries for 120 yards. All of a sudden, you're throwing your entire fab at the beginning of the season on Kaylon Black to maybe not even start for the entire season. So we'll see there. That's one that's really critical there, our CMC handcuff situation. Linda Wells says the Cardinals are definitely tanking this year. They're aiming to get Manning in next year's draft, trying to rekindle what Manning to Harrison magic. I'm hoping that they're tanking. That was what my thought process was when they initially said we're going with Jacoby Brissett as our starting quarterback. I was thrilled, fantastic. I love what Jacoby brings to from a fantasy perspective to Trey McBride and our boy Michael Wilson and hopefully Marvin Harrison Jr., who is honestly, as I was doing a draft the other day and I was like shocked at the his ADP. He's a faller. A lot of people will skip over him. So even where he is ranked right now, just know that you're probably going to be able to draft him for lower just because people will instinctually skip over Marvin Harrison Jr. So it's interesting. But I'm hoping that they commit to the tank in full and let Jacoby Brissett start the entire season. My worry with seeing that strength of schedule there for Arizona is that it's great from the perspective of I want them to play from behind so that Jacoby Brissett can chuck the ball a good 40 times. Fantastic. But I do slightly fear if we get Jacoby Brissett losing every single game to start off. And it's fine for us from a fantasy perspective, and we're happy. We've got no problem. But then they decide, hey, let's give Carson Beck a try. That's where I get a little bit concerned because I don't have confidence that Carson Beck would be able to put up the same level of volume for our fantasy perspective that Jacoby Brissett would be giving us. So I do think it's a tank. And then I get scared if that tank includes letting Carson Beck help with the tank. So that'll be an interesting one as well, for sure. I'm so scared on that one. But I think I cross my fingers that we're going to get Jacoby Brissett for the majority of the season. But that does give me slight pause in terms of being careful about overdrafting those Cardinals assets because obviously we've got a hefty ADP on Trey McBride. We'll have an hefty ADP on Jeremiah Love, who will require checkdowns, right? Because again, Cardinals, bad team, playing from behind, going to require checkdowns. We know Jacoby Brissett can do that. We don't know if Carson Beck will be check down friendly. So again, I was very comfortable. The Carson Beck thing very much so irritated me for sure. But Only Morale makes a good point that Arch Manning won't be the number one quarterback in our next coming year. I think you might be right about that one. I think there are a couple of other guys that are going to be the preference there for sure. And, there's some other guys that would not instinctually be the first guys off the board. It's going to be a very interesting draft. Like, what if Trinidad Chambliss repeats what he did last year? I don't think he would ever go to the number one quarterback overall, but it would make it to where maybe we get one of those years where, like we did with, Drake May and them's year, where we had all of those quarterbacks going so high. So it'll be fun. I think it'll be fun. Shout out to CK Comedy in the chat. Thank you for tuning in. 2026 waiver wire pick said, can you make a full video for us once the full? Oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's a great idea. I didn't have that on my schedule. I'm organized. I'm more organized this year. It's working out well. I have all my content planned out through end of June, but I can adjust. Yeah, I think that would be cool to do a NFL schedule release so we can draft best players who will crush it in the fantasy playoffs. Yeah, let's look at that early. Geez, I'm actually going to take a picture here to make sure. I've got a bad memory, guys. I'm not going to lie. I can remember numbers and stuff. I'm literally going to sit here and take a picture of your comment so I don't lose it. Ha ha ha. Thank you so much. That's a good suggestion there. All right. We had a nice little chat there of the rookie or the who will be the number one overall pick next year. We assume it's a quarterback, right? But who will be, who's going to be the first quarterback next year? I think it's going to be very interesting because there's a lot of good options for sure. A lot of good options. 2026 waiver wire pick says George Pickens might be the wide receiver one in Dallas this year. CeeDee Lamb is not the top wide receiver in Dallas anymore. I can't argue with you on that one. My only fear with George Pickens is, which might be like a hyper overreaction on my part, just maybe being a little bit too cautious there. Because at the very least, we haven't heard him whine or anything or make any weird posts, but playing on the franchise tag after the year that he had when he was thinking that last year was his prove it year to get a contract, I do worry that we get a version of him in season that gets a little bit more frustrated and demotivated. But he's playing on he's making good money and it's all guaranteed, right? So, hey, that's not a major issue, but I would be understandable. I would understand. his frustration in terms of not getting that contract in this offseason and having to play on the tag. So if he's frustrated, I would totally get that. And also, it makes me worry, like, what if he gets in, knowing that he's playing for a contract, right? And knowing the level of proof that he gave last season, what if he gets like an ankle injury and, it maybe only takes a week to heal, but he is extra cautious and takes 4 weeks, because he's in a contract year and he has to protect himself. And why does he need to push it? It's not like Dallas is going to a Super Bowl. Sorry, Cowboys fans. So that would be my only fear there. But yeah, George Pickens is just, when he is in the right mindset, he's just on another level. He's a better receiver, quite frankly. And that's no insult to CD, right? CD's fantastic, but Pickens is special. So, I mean, he looks like he's playing on easy mode 24/7. So yeah, I agree that, we might see the repeat of what we saw last year. So arguably, if there's someone who could logically, because it's DJ Dallas, or sorry, not DJ Dallas, Jesus. DJ or Del J is 840 was saying in the chat. You don't know what to do with CD or Pickens because neither seems priced right. And I agree on that one. The pricing is weird. And I found myself theoretically trying to move George Pickens down further in the rankings, but I couldn't, right? Because, I mean, when you're looking at it, I feel like I moved him down as much as humanly possible. But, I mean, how much more can you? He's my wide receiver 11 right now. But the guys after him are AJ Brown, right? New team. Assuming new team in New England, which is cool, right? But again, that is us hoping, which also, hey, we're on the schedule release, which I realize I've had the schedule release up here the entire time, or the strength of schedule here the entire time. New England's strength of schedule being one of the tougher schedules is very interesting because we all had the criticism last year of the soft schedule that the Patriots played in season. And then they hit that schedule, obviously, of a lot tougher defenses in the playoffs. And while they obviously got to where they needed to go, it was still a very difficult situation in terms of the offense looking different once they finally hit those very aggressive defenses that they never had to, or very aggressive teams that they never had to deal with in season. So seeing, a potential hangover here for the Patriots and a very difficult schedule is very concerning. And it's very concerning, obviously, because, Drake May is consensus QB, 3 right now? In general, is it QB 3? I think. I'm pretty sure everyone has Lamar over him at this point. Yeah. QB 3. There's some outliers, right? But for the most part, everyone feels like it's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and then Drake May. But knowing the potential for a rebound here of negativity, a tougher schedule to deal with, you could argue that you would want to go with a Joe Burrow over him. Although there's obviously health concerns, and then there's Jane Daniels after him, health concerns, right? And then guys like Jalen Hurts, again, concerns around just the level of upside, right? After we've seen 2 underwhelming seasons from him from a fantasy perspective. He's in a rough spot, right? And then do we trust that his volume is going to increase? He mainly operated off of efficiency last season. Are we trusting that it's going to increase in 2026 with the addition of AJ Brown, and AJ is going to get the level of volume that he wants? Because the Patriots were very much so spread it around type of team, right? Especially in terms of touchdowns, where ironically, Drake May preferred Kayshon Boutte. The connection was excellent last season between him and Kayshon Boutte in terms of touchdowns and Kayshon Boutte's reliable hands, really. So it'll be interesting to see how all that, shakes out. But I say all that to say that when you're looking at George Pickens and the guys behind him are an AJ Brown in a new situation, Chris Olave, who is obviously showed fantastic last season, but we wonder, right, what is the addition of Jordan Tyson going to do? Is Tyler Shuck going to carry over the level of production that we saw at an end of last season, or does he have a second year regression, right? Which I lean towards no regression there, because I feel like his situation is closer akin to that of what Drake May had the year before, right? There's been nothing but upgrades added here for Tyler Shuck. So I do feel good about him. But Jordan Tyson is going to chip away at Chris Olave. Then you have Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Cedric McMillan, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams. So yeah, it's tough to move George Pickens back. Arguably, he has to be a top 12 wide receiver, and there's nothing you can do to change that. So it's a weird place for his pricing, knowing that he is theoretically the second receiver, but technically operating as the wide receiver one from a production standpoint, but it could flip at any time. It's tough to evaluate. And CeeDee Lamb arguably should be a bit further back, right, as well, in terms of his ranking. So they are a weird pairing there. They're a weird pairing for sure. Thank you so much for someone reposting the stream. I appreciate that. They said New York Knicks fan was the one. Thank you. Only Morale says, oh, yeah, talking about CD. Only Morale says, I'm going CD, guaranteed. Guarantee you he's going to go early in every single draft, guaranteed. Yeah, I don't know if people move him back that much. Jeff Rogers says, where do you have Jeremiah Love, Frank? I'm definitely a little bit more conservative with Jeremiah Love. I know that. I have him ranked as my RB14, and right now he is consensus. What is consensus? He is consensus. Oh, RB13. Okay, I think people have rolled it back. It was a little bit more aggressive, but he's honestly got a wide range. Like if you compare, so Derrick Henry, because you can see in ECR, you can see the best and the worst rankings of the majority of drafter or majority of rankers. Derrick Henry is RB12, and his range of rankings is the best he has ranked is RB9, and the worst that he has ranked is RB15. Jeremiah Love's is the best he has ranked is RB9, and the worst he has ranked is RB18. Josh Jacobs is after him, and he's got a more condensed spread there as well. Kyren Williams has a more condensed spread. So I feel like we're still kind of on polar opposite ends in terms of how people are viewing Jeremiah Love. But again, that one kind of comes back to the concerns with what happens to that Arizona offense if Carson Beck starts. I don't mind the Cardinals playing from behind because Jacoby Brissett is fantastic for checkdowns. So I don't care about that. Jeremiah Love is going to get his. But again, I have to keep him as an RB2, a mid-tier RB2 at best, just because of the possibility of the quarterback change there, the tanking, and it getting a little weird, a little funky there. So I've got him ranked behind guys like Chase Brown, Kenneth Walker, well, Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, Chase Brown, Amari Hampton, Derrick Henry, right? Because assuming if we're in on a Lamar Jackson bounce back, we have to naturally be in on a Derrick Henry as well, right? After that, Jeremiah Love, and then I have ranked after him Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, Kyren Williams, Bucky Irving. So again, those are guys that I feel very comfortable in terms of their role, but they do not have probably the level of upside that a Jeremiah Love would have if all things went perfectly, just because, again, of the receptions probably carrying him. I think Breece Hall would maybe be comparable in terms of the same type of upside, but bad team situation. So kind of similar there. Let's see here. Only Morale says, though, on Jeremiah Love, the Cardinals have like 3 running backs. They do, but I do think, and I know that we might feel a little hesitant to say that given how bad they are they really going to want to put an aggressive workload on Jeremiah Love? Teams have proven that they don't care how bad they are. They're not saving up the running back. He's still going to be out there. So yeah, they have bodies, but they just have bodies, right? James Conner is, I unfortunately think, I think James Conner hit the age wall. So I would not expect him to contribute at an equal level. We have seen nothing out of Trey Benson at this point. And then Tyler Algier. People do have fear of Tyler Algier and the potential of him taking goal line touches. Obviously, we saw that with Bijan Robinson. So if it can happen with him, it can happen with anybody, but different coaching staff. So not necessarily the same thing. LaFleur has sat under Sean McVay, which means that it could go either way. We've seen Sean McVay operate with his RB1, Kyren Williams, at an aggressive clip, playing a stupid amount of snaps, being the only running back used. And then we also saw him tilt last year, which last year would have been with LaFleur, to that even split of Corum and Kyren Williams. So it's possible, but I do think that we're still going to have strong RB2 production out of Jeremiah Love, but I absolutely, under no circumstances, would push him into RB1 territory. I wouldn't do it. If anything, I would push him back a little bit more and let maybe a Breece Hall get above him, which is just the quarterback situation sucks. I hate that. The team situation sucks for Breece Hall. Arguably, I would want Breece Hall higher, but it's literally just the same situation. The only difference is that we know Breece is the RB1 and no one will be creeping in on those touches. And I could argue maybe for a Travis Etienne going above him, because while Travis doesn't have that same ceiling, right, that a Jeremiah Love would have, Travis will give us very steady production. And I do not have fear of Alvin Kamara creeping in and being utilized, because I think what we saw out of Kamara and the downturn of production was really, that was it, sadly, which I hate, because I've got Kamara who will sit forever on some dynasty teams, sadly, because I was holding on, hoping that they would trade him, and he refused. So that was not fun. He really just screwed himself and us over from a fantasy perspective, but what does it matter? He wants to stay in New Orleans, so that's his right. That's where he's happy, so I don't blame him on that one. Mega K Bish says, which NFL offense outside of Minnesota do you think is the most improved candidate? Ooh, good question there. I would say that the most improved candidate is probably Tennessee. Tennessee is the one that I would go with on that one. Again, I love what I saw out of Cam Ward last season in terms of the progress that he made in the back half of the season. I don't have the stats in front of me, but his overall stats were okay, right? But if you really segment it down to first half versus second half, there's second half backloaded. He was excellent in the back half of the season, which says a lot, because obviously coach was fired, changes going on. No true wide receiver one. Chimere Dike and Elikai Maynard did the best they could, but I mean, they're not wide receiver ones, right? The running backs are what they are. So he was not working with the most flashy group of weapons there. Not a great offensive system, not a great coaching staff. And what he was able to do in the back half of the season, actually, I'm low-key going to pull it up so we can talk glowingly about him, because I want to give him his props, right? Because we're not drafting him from a fantasy perspective, right? Just because of the fact that when we're looking at him, the lack of rushing upside just makes it not a desirable situation, right? In terms of saying, like, yeah, I want to roll with Cam Ward as my QB1. No, QB1 or QB2 for Superflex, sure, right? But in the back half of the season, he played against teams like Houston. Well, really, even before that, right? But Houston, Seattle, Jacksonville, Cleveland, San Francisco was an easy matchup at that point in the season. But Kansas City, New Orleans defense got stronger towards the end of the season too. So really the back half of the season was very difficult for him. And he pulled through with just literally one interception over that time period. And I can't add it up right off the bat, but I want to say it was like 12 touchdowns. Because I can't do that quick math, but maybe about 12 touchdowns, only one interception in the back half of the season there. Multiple games where he was very through for volume. So that was good, right? Not super efficient, but again, not the strongest receiving core. So we give a little bit of reprieve on that one. I feel like there's promise there. Like when I look at him and the addition of Brian Dable, who I don't trust as a head coach, but I do trust to develop a quarterback. That's proven. I know that you can identify, and the fact that you chose to come to Cam Ward is a very promising factor for me, because he's got a good eye for quarterbacks, right? Great eye for quarterbacks. He can develop a quarterback, and his system is good. So I feel very good about Cam Ward, and he's not going to have Cam Ward out there running into concussions, because Cam Ward just doesn't do that. So we don't have to worry about that. So yeah, Cam Ward in that Tennessee offense, right? We got Carnell Tate added. They've made proper moves. Obviously, they've now changed to a defensive head coach, and Saleh, I do think the combination of Saleh and Brian Dable will be real cute. So I like that. I feel improvements and more competitive games coming here. And they did have some competitive games, arguably last season. Again, they had a very difficult schedule. That was not pretty. So much easier in terms of strength of schedule this season. Obviously, we see them towards the easier end right there. So definitely feeling really good about the progress that the Tennessee offense will be moving forward, which actually, is interesting because I was thinking about, as I was doing a draft this week, I was thinking about, how comfortable do I feel about drafting Tony Pollard? Um, because in theory, he should be the RB1. If I'm looking like thinking, but we have to figure out what Brian Dable is going to like. It's going to come down to who Brian Dable wants. And I think Tony Pollard kind of fits that mold of what Brian Dable wants in a starting running back as well. So I feel comfortable with that. The only question I have is that at some point they want to see what they have in Nick Singleton. Obviously, this year is still not going to be a competing year for Tennessee, right? And Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears are not under contract in 2027. So I would imagine they want to get Singleton out there and at least see if he could be a starting running back or if they need to go and draft somebody next year. So that's the one that I feel good about. Oh, in addition of Wan'Dale Robinson as well. So we've got the receiving core has gone from question marks to brand new rookie receiver in Carnell Tate. Wan'Dale Robinson added in there, who's a great possession receiver, and versatile as well. So I just feel good about this Tennessee offense and most improved heading into next season there. Jumping back to the chat here, I lost my place in terms of where I was. So I'm going to go at the bottom here because sadly, I lost my place, guys. So I'm sorry, but I appreciate it. Because we got some Geno Smith comments here as well. We got a nice little Geno Smith discussion here going on in the chat. Leon says, Geno, two seasons removed from 4,000-yard season with DK and JSN. I think he can be better. It can be a better version of Jacoby Brissett, who is not a great quarterback, but can be useful from a fantasy perspective. I kind of agree with that one because you can make the arguments, right? That obviously the final year with Seattle wasn't horrific, right? It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrific. And you can not fault him for what happened in Vegas because I'm not sure who would have been successful in that situation. The offensive line was, and that's why when people talk about the offensive line situation, what is offensive line concerns for offensive line concerns for Arizona, right? When talking about Jeremiah Love in that offense, right? I don't think that people understand just how destitute the Vegas offensive line was. For every bad that Arizona's line was last season, it was nowhere near what Vegas was dealing with. That was egregious and disgusting. And the coaching situation was terrible too. No offense to Pete Carroll. He's had wonderful years, but looking back, and the players felt this as well. They made vocal complaints about the coaching situation. There was weird nepotism of, coaching there that shouldn't have been, probably in the position that they were coaching. Unfortunately, when the NFL team grades came out, the feedback that they had for their coaches was genuinely awful across the board. So what Geno was dealing with in Vegas, I completely forgive him for that. So it's possible that he could bounce back. My only fear is that he's bouncing back to an excellent group of weapons, right? The Jets have done their big one in terms of saying, okay, well, you're looking at a receiving core of Garrett Wilson, Omar Cooper Jr., who I like a lot. Kenyon Sadiq added now as well, and Breece Hall at running back and an excellent pass catcher. So, he's clearly, love Brock Bowers, but Brock Bowers did not play the majority of the season, and he played injured for a good portion of that. So we're looking at it really and truly. And Jacoby Myers made it through less than half of the season before going over to Jacksonville. So really, Geno was throwing to nobody, right? The only weapon that he had consistently was Ashton Genty. So he's getting an upgrade in weapons, right? But I don't know if I believe in the system in terms of the offensive coordinator and the team in general. And the offensive line, I don't know if they improved it enough. And it will not be as bad as Vegas, but it's not going to be great. And I do kind of feel like when I'm looking at the history of these Seattle quarterbacks that have gone in, granted, it's just two, right? In terms of Russell Wilson and Geno Smith. But Seattle has done a great job of exiting out of quarterbacks right before they become destitute. So I do wonder what Seattle saw and if it really is a Geno Smith problem. But it is a much better situation, ironically, with the Jets than what he had in Vegas. That's crazy to even say, right? Yeah, they have too much talent, is what Leon's saying. Too much talent. They lost Garrett Wilson in October, didn't have him all year. So it's such a group of weapons. I feel positive about the future. I actually just did a couple of dynasty drafts, and I did grab a Kenyon Sadiq in a league where I could use a tight end. It's got Isaiah Likely that I'm crossing my fingers, but I could use a stronger tight end one, or even if I could, flex if it gets to that point. But I have pretty much taken comfort in the fact that I don't know that this year is going to be it for guys like Omar Cooper and Kenyon Sadiq. That hopefully what we see is the Jets be able to get their ideal quarterback of the future next year. And that's what turns into it. Although I will say, I'd be lying if I did not take a couple of shares of Cade Klubnik. Obviously, I'm a Clemson person, right? But if Geno doesn't make it through the season, logically, Cade is going to be the start. I mean, there's no other competition. Like, logically, Cade will see the field. So it'll be interesting to see, right? Because Cade once upon a time, Cade was a potential first overall pick. So we'll see on that one for sure. Let's see here. B. Stewart says AJ Brown to New England in June. He could feast there with Drake May. He could. It's the schedule release that worries me for sure. Let's see here for comments. Thank you, Leon. I appreciate that so much. Leaving says about the Raiders, when your owner cuts his own hair, what can you expect? That is true. He does well with his WNBA team, but obviously that might not have much to do with him. That might not have much to do with him. Before we close out, I do want to do the mailbag questions, since, again, I did commit to doing these mailbag questions and making sure that we are on track here. And there are a couple things we did not discuss that we had on the slate. One of the mailbag questions was, should we be concerned about David Njoku on the Chargers? Fade Gadsden. I'm surprised no one said anything about David Njoku in the chat, or maybe I missed it because I lost my place for a little bit there. But I'm not too concerned about the addition of David Njoku. We did just see him straight up lose his gig to Harold Fannin Jr., who is fantastic, right? And apples to apples, I would say, and I think I did feel like this in terms of them as prospects. I did prefer Harold Fannin Jr. to Oronde Gadsden, although I liked Oronde Gadsden a lot, right? But Harold Fannin Jr. is a more complete tight end. I still think that Gadsden is the tight end one there. I'm not wholly panicked. I do hesitate, and I think his ADP is fine right now. It's weird because he's in that weird spot where he's technically QB, or not QB, tight end 10-ish right now. I have him as tight end 9. Arguably, I can move that back. He's tight end. Oh, he's moved back. Oh, that's a dramatic jump. Everybody's already updated their rankings post. Wow. So I guess, prior to Njoku, Gadsden, from my memory, was tight end 10 in rankings. And now he is rolled back to consensus tight end 13. But a lot of that has to do with George Kittle moving up significantly. And that is because they came out and said that they think that George Kittle can be ready by week 1. I will say this, guys, that Achilles tear was very, 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 very late. Logically, the timeline does not make sense to start week 1. And when it comes to 49ers timelines, I do not, under any situation, any circumstance, trust a timeline that the 49ers give us. And that's not even fully related to George Kittle, just in general. When we think about the 49ers team as a whole in their system, they purposefully function as a system that can operate and win and make it to the playoffs without multiple superstars. So I don't think they will rush back Kittle. Them saying that we think he could be back from week 1, I caution you just to not overreact. And obviously we'll know soon, but I know a lot of people are doing best ball drafts right now, right? But at the same time, I caution you to just be careful there. because the jump that he has made in terms of now being ranked back up into more of the place where we are drafting him to immediately start in week 1 is a little bit concerning because I don't see that happening, right? To push Oronde Gadsden back is very interesting. The panic over, I feel like people have been wanting to push Oronde Gadsden back in rankings for a while. They brought in a blocking tight end, and I believe Charlie Kohler, and they were like, "Oh, well, that's it. It's goodbye, Oronde Gadsden, because you can't block," as if suddenly that was new information, right? That was suddenly going to make a difference between what we saw last year and this year. The only thing that concerns me about Gadsden is not Njoku. I think that he would have the clear advantage over Njoku. The only thing that concerns me is that the Chargers are so deep at pass catcher that realistically, Gadsden might be the third look at best, right? There's Lad McConkey, Quentin Johnston, who I both think will default be well over in terms of the first or second look compared to Oronde Gadsden, and then Trey Harris as well, who I do think will potentially come on very strong this season. They were pushing him up towards the end of the season, and it was tough to really judge because obviously with Chargers offensive line situation, the pass game was just nasty, but they seemed very intentional about that. And I do think that they're going to roll 3 deep. And it's possible Gadsden might just be the fourth look. So low end tight end 1 is more of the range where I feel comfortable with him for sure. Let's see here. Yeah, Leon says Kohler is signed to unlock the wide move to tight end like Gadsden or Njoku. Yeah. And I think maybe some of the fear is because when we're looking at Mike McDaniel, we know that when he locks in on a tight end, it works out perfectly. The upside is there. And it just so happens that the past 2 tight ends that he's done that with are older veterans, right? We had those glorious couple of weeks, the glorious couple of weeks with Darren Waller last season, where he was just pumping out the touchdowns on 20% of snaps. And then obviously we had the random Jonnu Smith season as well. So it might lead you to believe that, the veteran is going to be Njoku can, but also I think unfortunately we might have where he's closer to that wall area. Unfortunately, now, he's still youngish, but again, I still lean towards Gadsden for sure. Leon says if you are a Kittle owner looking for insurance, you could do worse than Njoku or Gadsden as a backup for sure. And honestly, I think you could just go Tonjes as well. They extended Jake Tonjes. That should logically be the direct replacement. Now, it's possible that we should have Mike Evans. Like Mike Evans will start the season healthy, right? How long he'll make it, that's the question mark. But Mike Evans is a big-bodied player, so it is entirely possible that more of the George Kittle usage does transition over to Mike Evans to help compensate. But I think if you want to draft Kittle and then handcuff it directly with Jake Tonjes, that's not a bad move, to be honest. And it's not like anyone's going to be fighting you for Jake Tonjes. It's just a matter of, do you want to roster 2 tight ends? But I think that's a very interesting one as well, because that's 100% the clear direct replacement 1-for-1 there. He's not George Kittle, but we know that he can handle volume and put up touchdowns as well. We saw some good situations there for sure. And then Leon also points out that Kittle plays so hard that re-injury is always a possibility, especially with Achilles, right? Because we know that those can bring along additional compensation issues. We know he's dealt with hamstrings in the past. So yeah, I do fear, right? Because we've seen when you get those ankle region injuries, right? A lot of times, and I'm no physical therapist, right? But a lot of times those are often tied to increased risk of hamstring injuries, right? That's what the experts say. I'm not one, but that's what the medical experts say. So yeah, the re-injury and the fact that we know that hamstrings have been an issue with Kittle. I hate that. I hate that at all. Yeah, and Leaving says, no way Kittle's ready. Why pass on Njoku? I think that's just the trust they have in Tonjes, to be honest. I think that's literally it. They got him they extended him for 2 years, fairly cheap. And I low key kind of wonder because they didn't, I thought that they would draft a tight end. Late day 2 or day 3 because this was a super deep class at tight end. Like when I'm at the end of my dynasty drafts right now, I'm looking at tight ends, to be quite frank, because it starts to really thin out. You can't draft a running back in the 4th round of dynasty drafts. It's just nasty, right? There's some wide receivers that you can take there, but really you get there and there's some talented tight ends that could have some relevancy there. So I was shocked that they didn't draft a tight end on day 3 with the level of depth. That was the literal only position that was super deep in this draft, which was exactly why we got that like 2nd, 3rd round run of tight ends. We were like, why are y'all not taking the receivers? Well, the tight ends are really nice in this draft. So I was surprised they didn't bite, which makes me wonder if they do think that Jake Tonjes could be the future for them once Kittle does retire. So, because he's old, man. He's old, sadly. No offense to him, but he is a wee bit aged. Jeff Rogers says, is Kenneth Walker a good pick in the 3rd round? Yeah, I'm pro Kenneth Walker. What's his his rank right now is RB 11. That's very reasonable. That's his ECR rank is RB 11. And he is going at pick 24. So yeah, 2-3 turn. I have him ranked as my RB 10. So yeah, that's appropriate. Yeah. If Kenneth Walker, end of round 2, early round 3, mid round 3 would be a bargain. Yeah, I feel very good about that range for him. I know that obviously there is some worry that because we saw quite the committee there in Seattle. But we've seen Kenneth Walker operate as a lead back before. And for what it's worth, again, I talked about it before, that nasty committee that we saw in Kansas City with Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, and then trying to, put in other, Brashard Smith and whatnot and try and the weirdness, that was Matt Nagy. Eric Bieniemy is not going to do that. Eric Bieniemy was very positive from a running back perspective for Kansas City. So I'm very happy that Eric Bieniemy is back because he doesn't do the pass thing. That's just going to be Andy Reid's vision, right? And Bieniemy will help us get that running back room back on track. And I do think we're going to see Kenneth Walker used as a true 3-down back there. And we could see increased usage and reliance on the run game. Obviously, with Patrick Mahomes coming off of the injury, maybe we see him run a little bit less. So I think it's kind of a twofold situation. If Mahomes is a little bit more cautious with movement because of the injury recovery, then we get more usage of Kenneth Walker. Or if Mahomes recovers, no problem. And it sounds interesting, which I'm not surprised, is Patrick Mahomes, right? But it sounds like he is more on track for being 100% good to go for week 1. And I kind of do trust that version, especially considering his timeline, right? So if he is good and okay running at the beginning of the season and still fairly mobile, honestly, all that does is open up more lanes for Kenneth Walker, right? So I do like Kenneth Walker a lot as a pick here for sure. Yeah, if he can stay, if he stays healthy, if he's good to go. Obviously, we've always had those like 2 or 3 games in a season from him, but even then, so like a good 15 games out of Kenneth Walker, like I'm so in. I am so in. I like a lot of, I just in a draft, I just stacked Patrick Mahomes and Rashee Rice, and it's tight end premium. So I did go ahead and grab later Travis Kelce for a bargain. He was I was like, tight end premium, extra receptions. I'm not expecting a lot of touchdowns there, but I feel like in tight end premium specifically because of receptions, Kelce should still get a good chunk and be second to Rashee Rice. So it could work out there. So I'm very much so pro Kansas City this year, oddly enough. I'm usually not very heavy on drafting Kansas City, but we're getting that nice discount on Patrick Mahomes because of the injury. And Rashee Rice is a decent value as well, too. So, and then again, the depressed ADP for Travis Kelce is literally like tight end 12 or so, right? That was where I was able to snag him. So yeah, it's a nice little cost effective. And I think Kenneth Walker is very reasonably priced as well. So yes, pro Kansas City, oddly enough. this season from a fantasy perspective. Making true money says new subscriber and Panthers fan here. Welcome. Thank you for the subscription there. And positives coming for the Panthers, I think. I love me some Bryce Young. Little sweet cherub that he is. I am hopeful that they continue to progress in giving more volume to Bryce Young, because every time he's been given volume, because they've been forced to do it, because they were playing just a shootout type of game, he does very well. It's not as if they win the few chances that he had to push volume that he failed. He handled it very well. I just think that Canales wants to run a very balanced attack there. But at the same time, man, just let Bryce loose just a little bit. I mean, we've got weapons, right? Teteroa McMillan just gave us a little taste, right? There's more there. There's so much more there if we could just push a little bit more volume. And what we saw out of Jalen Coker, you guys know I love Jalen Coker. I believe that's real 100%. That is one of my favorite later round picks for sure. Yet again. So feel good about that. And obviously we've talked about Jonathan Brooks a lot there and Chuba Hubbard, and just the fact that, they got no loyalty at running back. They're going to want to, if Jonathan Brooks is healthy, they'll give him a try there. So he'll have the chance to shine. From Leon here, who are your favorite under the radar handcuffs? I like Keaton Mitchell and Mike Washington Jr. I do too. And I think Mike Washington Jr.'s ADP is not going to creep up to the level that it should, ironically, because when we're looking at Clint Kubiak, we literally just saw him run a committee. And while obviously Ashton Genty is on another level than, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, at the same time, I would not be shocked if we had the usage of Mike Washington as a sort of a change of pace option to help alleviate if they're going to go a lot run heavier this season as well. Especially get that defense turned around, the offensive line better. So if they can go heavier from a run perspective, I don't expect them to put up the same level of run volume that Seattle had, like over 400 touches per se to the running backs. But I would not be shocked if they had to give a significant workload to Mike Washington Jr. because they push so run heavy, and you don't want to give Ashton Genty like 330 plus touches, right? So alleviate some of that. Mike Washington, maybe some goal line touches. He is quite a big guy, right? So I could see him playing the Charbonnet to Ashton Genty's Kenneth Walker in a Clint Kubiak system for sure. I'm excited for Keaton Mitchell there as well. And then in terms of other handcuffs, I think that, as funny as it sounds, I do think that the whole Adam Randall, I'm not being a Clemson homer, I promise, but the whole Adam Randall, Derrick Henry thing as a pairing does make a lot of sense, because we have seen that there is only a certain level of volume that they will give Derrick Henry on a given week, right? Some weeks they'll let him run loose, right? Other weeks they take a little bit more of a cautious approach if they don't have to, right? And Adam Randall would be a very interesting change of pace back compared to Derrick Henry, because you're getting hit with a 1-2 punch of guys that are tall and big, right? And then Adam Randall has the added benefit of being a pass catcher. So I can see where he would surpass Justice Hill as the handcuffy option there. And we know that theoretically, switching over to the new offensive coordinator there, we could have more varied usage in the backfield, right? Similar to what we saw in Chicago with the usage of Kyle Monangai off of DeAndre Swift. So I feel like that's a very interesting late round one. But other options in terms of handcuffs, obviously, I don't feel like Kyle Monangai is a true handcuff, but I will always love Kyle Monangai paired there with DeAndre Swift with the usage for sure. Another option in terms of guys that I would want to grab for sure, again, we talked about CMC in the handcuff, but we got to figure out exactly who it is for sure. And then outside of that, probably investing in Brian Robinson, if anything were to happen to Bijan for sure. But those are some of them as well. Yes, the Carolina backfield is interesting with Dowdle gone for sure. CNC says, Harold, will Harold Fannin Jr. be the next Brock Bowers for Todd Monken? Thoughts? I've gone back and forth on this one. I'm not going to lie here, because I want to believe that Harold Fannin Jr. can continue to be the first look in that offense, right? And I'm going to erase the quarterback issues, right? And say that, hey, whatever they do, whatever it is, who it's going to be, I truly don't know at this point. I don't trust, by the way, I don't trust whatever comes out of Cleveland in terms of them saying, just FYI, please take what comes out of their reporters with a grain of salt, because we know that they have too many quarterbacks on roster and they are factually going to try to sell one off. So there's going to be funky language, kind of similar to last year. We had so much positives around Kenny Pickett because they were selling Kenny Pickett. So just keep that in mind when you hear things out of Cleveland, that it's not necessarily what's going to actually happen, right? But I want to be so erase the quarterback thing, right? And just say whatever happens at quarterback, they're going to have stability, right? In a perfect world, Todd Monken is going to get them right. So when I'm looking at Harold Fannin Jr., I would love for him to be the first look in that offense, but I can't shake the thought that Casey Concepcion could take a decent amount of receptions. I don't know that I would right off the bat put him in the well over 100 targets area. It could be very evenly split in this first year because it's not just him, it's Denzel Boston, who I love. I wanted so much better for Denzel Boston. I had visions. And this wasn't it, but it can work out, right? I just hate that I feel like, anyway, and Jerry Jeudy is still there and he's not going anywhere because he's a very poor trade candidate because his contract is not ideal. But there's a lot of bodies there suddenly. So I do still feel comfortable with Harold Fannin Jr. as a target, right? He is my tight end 6 right now. I prefer Tyler Warren for sure because I feel very confident that Tyler Warren is going to surpass the 100 target mark. I think he can surpass 100 receptions. That's what I'm banking on with Tyler Warren. And then I think provided Tucker Kraft comes back fine from the injury, I trust Tucker Kraft as well. I think he's going to benefit a lot from the thinned out receiver core as well there. So less pass catchers, more Tucker Kraft. But Harold Fannin Jr. is my tight end 6 there. I just don't know if I trust him to have a Brock Bowers type of season, especially because the exit of David Njoku won't be a massive deal because he already pushed Njoku to the side, right, for the majority of the season. So we kind of already saw that for sure. And then Leon says, where do you think Tyreek Hill lands? Would his destination be for, where would they be for fantasy relevancy? I think it's going to be the Chiefs. I do. And I think it's going to be a deal where they know it's going to be the Chiefs and he knows it's going to be the Chiefs, but they're not going to sign him until he's absolutely ready. Which is interesting. It could obviously mess with targets for Xavier Worthy, but I would still be very trusting of Rashee Rice in his volume. So I think it is going to end up being the Chiefs, but I don't know if it'll actually be to start the season. I think we might be at that weird stage of his career where he's going to sign somewhere. It might not happen immediately just because of the injury, unfortunately, for sure. Leon says, Denzel Boston probably going to score 6 touchdowns as a rookie. Would say that's a floor. He's a fantastic red zone threat. And that's, that's what would be the concern for Harold Fannin Jr., because you're getting Concepcion in there that can garner high volume in terms of receptions. And then Boston, who is such a red zone threat. So I know it doesn't feel like it. And I know we want to feel the best for Harold Fannin Jr., but there are legitimately strong competitors in there for sure. And then Leon says his favorite tight end this year is Colston Loveland with Ben Johnson. Mine too. I have him ranked as my tight end 3. And that's behind McBride and Bowers. But, because you can't go over McBride and Bowers, it is what it is. But I think that Loveland has a legitimate shot at being the first look in that offense. I'm optimistic about Luther Burden, and I'm very hopeful that we get a Rome Odunze bounce back because I think that Roma Dunze can benefit from the exit of DJ Moore because we can finally get more varied usage, because it felt like they were just sending Roma Dunze downfield, like just boom, deep shot. There you go, downfield. And now that DJ Moore is gone, we can get some more varied usage from him. But honestly, I think that Colson Loveland can just be the first look in that offense. So I do like Loveland a lot to continue what we saw last season for sure. So yeah, very much so pro Loveland. But that wraps things up, guys. I am going to head out here, get these kids off to bed. I went a little longer than I should have, but we were having a good conversation and the chat was very live. If you're listening on the podcast, always feel free to join us every Wednesday night at 8 for the live chat. Discussion is fantastic. Lots of great comments, lots of great viewers. So I appreciate you all tuning in for sure. As a reminder, this is the Dear Miss Fantasy show. It is the mailbag show. We only did one mailbag question, but the chat was live. So that's why, forgive me. I've got more for next week. And as always, you can drop any questions on my YouTube channel on any of my videos. And as always, I appreciate a subscription to my YouTube channel as well. It's Tara time. I've got multiple videos drop in every single week. Keep a very regular schedule there for you guys all off season long. And I am live with you every Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST. But that wraps things up. I realized I did not turn on the basketball game on my TV, so I don't know what's going on. I need to see what's going on there because I also do basketball betting videos. So I got to go and head out and see what's happening in the NBA game. But I will talk to you all next week. As always, have a wonderful week. Thank you all. We'll talk to you again next week. Same time, same place. Have a good one.